Vladimirovich. Second, budget reserves are running out. Third, there are already 2 federal districts which openly are bankrupted. I mean, the whole federal district bankrupted. The whole thing is not going to last very long. Are we prepared for the end coming? Thank you.
All right, we have time for maybe a few more. One here from Ambassador Yuri.
Very short.
Very short comment, maybe?
Short comment. Does it work? Yes. I think one of the important issues when we speak about corruption or influence is also the fact that we should analyze our own system. I mean, not necessarily criticize, but analyze. We all know that there is a tradition that politicians who leave power go to work for businesses, for lobby groups, etc., etc. I think there should be a more honest discussion. I mean, I'm not against it. I understand why people do it. I mean, they are still in full strength. They have a lot to offer to businesses, to economy. But the question is, what are the rules of the game? I think they should be more specific. There should perhaps be a code, ethical code of conduct for people who go to that kind of work. Then we can also debate whether it would be legitimate to work for repressive regimes, or what does it even mean to work for a repressive regime in those circumstances. I think this is something to be discussed.
Excellent, thanks. All right, so we have 3 more questions. The last one about sort of our own system and our own kind of inherent vulnerabilities. We have the issue about what about if Russia becomes too weak, and then finally the China issue. I think we'll start the other way around, and I would also ask the panelists if they have any concluding remarks or final things they want to say to do so now. Start with you, Magnus.
Well, just 2 comments here. The question about a weak Russia. I think here we need to make a distinction between a weak state and a weak power. So Russia as a power, I would very much like to see as a much more weakening, much more fewer nuclear weapons and brigades. Whereas, of course, a weak Russia in a societal sense, which I believe that Putin is fundamentally sort of having today, is of course a problem. But having said that, I'm not as convinced as the majority of strategists today that what we're seeing is actually something which is doomed to go on forever or during a very long time. I mean, look at what happened in the mid-1980s. There were boycotts. There were sort of the second Cold War, as it was called in those days. And just a few years after, we had Reykjavik and some kind of dialogue going. Not because there was some kind of liberalization, but rather because out of weakness. So and that was the only one. The first question. The second question regarding this Schröderizacja. I believe that this is one of the disturbing features which differentiates this period from the Cold War. That we now, I mean, look at Sweden. Sweden doesn't really have any legislation which controls lobbyism, which I mean is one of the real weak spots for us as an open society. So I do believe, I really agree with that we have to analyze ourselves and how that could be exploited.
Great, thank you. Karen.
Well, I'll take up the weak Russia question. First of all, I'm fascinated by how sometimes Russian politicians and officials that come to give talks, you know, they seem to lay the responsibility at our door. You know, be careful what you do because you don't want a weak Russia, and Putin is your best bet. I think, again, we have to answer then that, well, change has to come from inside Russia. We should not pursue regime change. We should talk about policies. We think this is a good policy, we think this is the other is a bad policy, and explain why. Because it's not conducive to economic growth, because it's not conducive to an open society, etc. We should talk in terms of policies, not in terms of persons. When it comes to a weak Russia, first of all, I'd like to highlight an interesting paradox. Putin has now a rating that goes into 89%. I mean, he's bordering to 90%. It would seem that he's never been more popular. He should have felt never more secure. and yet there seems to be no end to the repressive measures that need to be introduced. This tells me that he's actually insecure. It should be a clue for us when we think about Russia's future. And again, I think the spectre is the opposition. Even if only 10% say that they're ready to go out into a political protest, 10% of Moscow's population, it's a lot. This is what worries the Kremlin, I would say. And another point when it comes to weakness, first of all, Russia will not run out of money. I'm sorry for anyone who believes that. It will not. The population will pay in reduced living standards. What will be costly for Russia is the fact that it won't modernize. And you've been talking about electronic dictatorship. I mean, only 3 years ago, the rating for Russia was still relatively free when it came to the internet. And so this is something that's happened very quickly. And the internet sector was actually one of the few very prosperous sectors of the economy, where you had SMEs and where you had innovation, and they've closed that down. One of the few sections of the economy that actually could develop into something fruitful. And this is happening in other sectors of the economy as well, and they're not getting investment. This is what will make Russia weaker and weaker. I'm worried at what's happening, what will happen on that road.
I totally agree with Yuri. We should have done this a long time ago. And let me call a spade a spade. I think it's a disgrace that Mr. Schröder is working for Gazprom, period. It's a disgrace. And I don't see Europe standing up and saying, hey, this is wrong. I'd also say, Andras, I think you're dead right. I think there is I think the expansion into, the intrusion into Ukraine, the expansion towards Syria is already a sign of implosion. The fact that he needs to do this is a sign that internally he is more and more inclined to show the people that we're expanding because we're okay, but I think it's a sign of huge problems. And you know, I have a long-term vision. I think Russia could fall apart. The reason why Chechnya is quiet is because he's paying the bill on time. He is paying the bill on time the first of every month. He's sending the check to Chechnya, and that's how they keep them quiet. Just wait. When he's not able to do that, we're going to see a terrible, terrible conflict between them and the periphery. Long term, I don't even exclude, and let me get back to my concept that I do see the Northern Europe as the stem cell of Western liberal societies. Don't exclude, and I'm pushing the Baltics. Not that they need to be pushed in that direction, but they will be part of this. Poland will be part of that, and interestingly enough, don't exclude St. Petersburg wanting to be part of the North, the developing North, if all the things are starting to collapse. So therefore, I would say that I do see a possibility of Russia imploding, falling apart, and we might see terrible things, but we might also see movements that we are not expecting. A final concluding remarks, two. One, be careful. It has been mentioned once today, I think it was Kurt, or maybe Mike. The next 12 months will be critical. Putin is counting on the weak leadership of the United States. I hope he's wrong, but he's counting on this, and he knows that the next American president will be a lot tougher, will have a much clearer line, and will push back. So he's going to take this opportunity to make further inroads. And then finally, I'd like to say, I'm a great believer, and I'd like to push back on you because I don't think this is a Hungarian view. I'm standing in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It blows cold from Europe and from America. I intend to stay right there in the middle. And I'd like to add, I'm a great believer in U.S. leadership. I can see what happens when there is no U.S. leadership. And you know, we Europeans, we hate American leadership, but we hate the lack of American leadership even more.
We'll end on that note. This has been a really, I think, terrific discussion. not just about what the challenge is from the Putin model, but also getting into some of the real nitty-gritty about how do we address this challenge. So please join me thanking our panel, András, Karo, and Magnus. And I think we're taking a little break now outside.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.